Welcome to the 5:30 meeting of the Douglas County Board of County Commissioners for Wednesday, October 26th. We have a bit of a unique situation today in that we had some water damage in our historic county courthouse building. And so, Sarah, maybe you want to start by giving us just a little bit of an update for the public on how our meeting happens to be on Zoom today.
Thank you, commissioners. Yes, this morning we had a contractor working on our fire suppression system, and the sprinkler system inadvertently had a burst of pipe, and we've had pretty substantial water damage in the southwest corner of the courthouse, from the attic through the county commission chambers into the first floor treasurer's office, and then into the appraiser's office at the lower level. Currently got about 60 fans blowing in that room behind me to try to dry out the building. We have moved the meeting to Zoom like we did during COVID. So it's always good to have had practice these things. So Commissioners Kelly and Willie are on the Zoom meeting, and I am here in the county courthouse in accordance with the Kansas Open Meetings Act, providing a location for the public that if they want to hear the meeting and they cannot or have not participated via Zoom, that they can hear what commissioners are having and we are saying, and then we can have public comment presented here as well. So and I know Commissioner Kelly has words to read regarding that, but what will happen with that is I will turn my laptop around and folks will sit here right in front of me, and they will have 3 minutes to provide their public comments, and then we will take the next public commenter. Folks can certainly provide public comment via Zoom. So we can certainly do that as well. Does that help, Commissioner Kelly?
Yeah, that's great. I'll go ahead right now and sort of read our statement. I'll make a few adjustments, folks, just so that you're used to, because of our situation this evening. So we want to welcome you, those who are with us at the old courthouse there in the rotunda with Sarah, and for folks joining us on Zoom. As Sarah mentioned, some information about public comment, but let me add just a little bit more. Each action item on the agenda will offer an opportunity for relevant public comment about that topic. We ask that you wait until the agenda item you're here for comes up for discussion. Additionally, near the start of our meeting, we'll invite folks to provide general public comment to the commission. This is a time for addressing issues that are not on today's agenda, but are related to general county business. Public comment will not be recorded and shared on the county's YouTube site to ensure compliance with YouTube's content policies. To hear public comment, individuals can join us live here on Zoom or there at the rotunda where Sarah is at. We will first call on folks who are there in person, and then we'll turn to any online commenters who are here with us tonight. If you're on Zoom, please plan to use the raise your hand function when the time comes and listen for staff to call your name. All comments will be limited to 3 minutes, and we ask everyone to give their full name and Douglas County residence for our meeting minutes. All public comments should be directed to the commission. We also reserve the right to mute and remove any speakers, vulgar, rude, or inappropriate. The public should also know that comments received by the commission during our meetings do not represent the views of the Douglas County government. If visual aids are used during the meeting, the presenter will share their screen. Please know that online participants will not be able to view them without a computer, smartphone, or tablet during tonight's meeting. Materials are published online for your reference. And lastly, a recording of the meeting will be available on our YouTube page and website. With that, we'll start our meeting. Our first item tonight is a proclamation for Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We traditionally will read the proclamation, and then I think Maggie Bornholt is here online. Is that right, Sarah? Looks like I think I saw Maggie's here online. And
yes.
There's Maggie. And Maggie, you'll have a chance to make some comments here if you like after I read the proclamation. Here's our proclamation for Domestic Violence Awareness Month, October 2022. In the county state of Douglas County, Kansas, in recognition of the critical work done by domestic violence advocates and allies in service of the survivors and victims they serve, we encourage all citizens to actively engage in the scheduled activities and events sponsored by the Willow Domestic Violence Center and other organizations working towards an eradication of domestic violence. whereas more than 20,000 calls are placed to domestic violence hotlines nationwide every day. Whereas one domestic violence incident occurs every 23 minutes, and one domestic violence murder occurs every 11 days in the state of Kansas. Whereas in Douglas County in 2020, there were 773 reported incidents of domestic violence, 287 which resulted in arrests. Whereas the impacts of domestic violence is felt not only by individuals and families, but by communities and a nation as a whole. And whereas Douglas County joins with others across the state of Kansas and nationwide in supporting domestic violence victims and survivors, the advocates and organizations who serve them, and holding offenders accountable in our community. Now, therefore, the Board of County Commissioners of Douglas County, Kansas do hereby proclaim October 2022 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month, adopted this day, October 26, 2022. Maggie, I want to give you a chance to come off mute and address those of here on the commission and watching or there in the courthouse.
Thank you, Commissioner Kelly, and thank you everyone else. I just wanted to say a couple of words about what we do at the Willow in case our public isn't aware. We do provide shelter services, court advocacy, and a number of other educational and prevention programs for all survivors of domestic violence and human trafficking. And we serve Douglas, Jefferson, and Franklin counties. And our hotline is 24 hours a day, and it is monitored by trained professionals. So if anyone ever needs our assistance, I encourage them to call the hotline at 785-843-3333. And I appreciate this proclamation being made. Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie, and thanks to all of those at the Willow Domestic Violence Center for the work that you do every day. Really appreciate it. We will get a signed proclamation to you very soon, I promise. Moving on with our agenda, we'll move now to our consent agenda items. We have 9 items on our consent agenda. First, I wanted to check in with Sarah. Sarah, are all those 9 items going to remain on our agenda this evening?
I believe Commissioner Willie would like to remove an item. I don't, so we probably should just open it up to commissioners.
Yep, I'll check. Commissioners, any commissioner have an item they'd like to remove for discussion?
I do. I'd like to remove item 2.2 for further discussion with the sheriff.
Thank you. I don't have any items beyond that. So I would take a motion on our consent. Oh, is there any member of the public who would like to remove a consent agenda item for further discussion?
Everything except 2.4. And I'll lump it all in a 1 3-minute statement for you.
So there's I don't know if you heard that, Commissioner
Yeah,
Kelly. There was a
everything but
request.
2.4, right?
Okay,
Everything but 2.4.
Yep.
everything but 2.4.
Okay. With that, I would take a motion to approve the consent agenda item.
I move to approve the single consent agenda item 2.4.
Excellent. Item 2.4. I'll second that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So it sounds like we have a member of the public who would like to provide comment on all other items. So maybe we'll start with that public comment covering all those items, and then we can go one by one. Commissioner Willie, if that's all right with you. Okay, we'll do that. So I'm going to invite the member of the public who has public comment on consent.
You're okay for that, Mr. Kelly?
I need to, well, I'll turn it around. So if you want to stay there, here you go.
Right, I just want to make sure everybody knows that you've got almost $600,000 on the consent agenda tonight. That's over $500,000 just being done through consent. And that's part of our budget problems. If we want to talk about some of this money being spent, that would be nice, but just putting it on the consent agenda and making it to where all we can do is hopefully get it pulled off in some cases, talk about it in others, but you guys spend money like nuts. Spend money like nuts. I don't even need the whole 3 minutes because that is just absurd to put $600,000 on the consent agenda alone.
Thank you.
Do we have additional public comment on the consent, which consent agenda item?
What he just did.
Okay, on 2.1.
2.1, got it.
So he makes a good point about how you guys are trying to ram through $500,000 here. And to anyone that's listening out there, this is why you should pay attention to local politics around here and get involved, because these people here, Patrick Kelly, Karen Willie, Shannon Reed, they operate in the dark, and they hope that nobody pays attention to this stuff so they can ram through more stuff that's going to impact your life. That's $500,000 you're gonna have to pay for. By the way, my name is Dr. Justin Spees. I'm running for Douglas County Commissioner in District 1 as a Republican, and I'm running against Patrick Kelly there. And these guys, they're so shady. This is just another example of that. They don't want you talking about it. They don't want you questioning it. They just want to be able to vote and just spend, you know, like that guy just said right there, they want to spend money like nuts. And this ain't a one-time thing, man. This is what they do every time. This is what they did when they raised your property taxes. There was no discussion about it. There was no talking about it. There was no plan. There was no solution. It was just a vote for raising it, and then they were done. And they hope that you guys are sitting at home watching TV, you know, paying attention to other things, but what's going on in here. And then the next thing you know, you're sitting there wondering why you're paying so much in taxes around here. Is because they're so irresponsible and they're not held accountable one bit for the money that they spend. The money is going out the door faster than it's coming in. They have a serious problem with spending this amount of money and not being able to want to talk about it with the public and get your feedback and have you guys question what they're doing in here. I mean, just look at this meeting, for example. There's a little bit of water, I guess, in the courthouse, and they use every little reason to not come in here and face the public. I mean, them putting all this money item on the consent agenda is a reflection of them like actually not wanting to be here to face you. They don't want to hear from the public at all, which is why they're also censoring us with our videos not being put up on YouTube. They don't want to hear from you. So I just encourage all you guys to out there to start paying attention a little bit more.
30 seconds.
Be more involved in this. Hold these fools accountable. They think you're the fool for not paying attention. They can spend all your money all they want because you ain't gonna question it. You ain't gonna challenge them. So, you know, start challenging these people.
Okay.
Any other consent, not general public comment. So this is just if you have a public comment on one of the consent items. Does anybody else have a question or comment on a consent agenda item? Okay, I don't see anyone here with additional comments on consent agenda items.
Thank you, Sarah. Anyone online, go ahead and raise your hand if you have public comment on item 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9. Not seeing any. Okay, so coming back to the commission now. Commissioner Willie, I know you had asked for item 2.2. Why don't we deal with that item first, and then we can discuss whether we want to do the rest of them as a group or do them individually.
Thank you. Yes, I pulled this item. I had a conversation with the sheriff and kind of wanted more of that to be in the public sphere. And in addition to that, I've asked through Sarah to have a little bit more information put into the memos for consent items, consent agenda items, so that we can follow up a little more easily. And I've also asked Sarah to talk about the process for the budget for, you know, we do a budget process, the budgets get approved, and then as money is spent, what the process is for what level of permission is needed to grant that. So Sarah, if you give us that, and then I'll ask some questions of our Sheriff Armbruster.
Thank you, Commissioner Willie. Yes, so each of these items were approved as a part of the county budget. But even though they're approved in the county budget, if they are over certain dollar threshold, they come back before the county commission to follow our purchasing policies related to how items are procured. So our finance policies state that items below $50,000 can be approved by myself or my assistant county administrator or a department head, depending on the threshold. Items above $50,000 need to come to the county commission for approval unless they're purchased under an existing contract or a cooperative contract. And we do require an RFP or a bid process to be conducted to make sure that we are getting the lowest and best bid. If in a situation that we do not do an RFP or we cannot find a contract where a price has been negotiated, the county commission can waive the financial policies and make an award of a contract. Does that answer your questions, Commissioner?
Yes, thank you. I wanted that not only for my own information, but also as part of the public. So thank you. Sheriff Armbruster, so you and I had a conversation, but I wanted to follow up with that. I was already aware somewhat of the search and recovery program that Douglas County Sheriff's Office had. I think most people are not. Can you elaborate on that and also what the vote request is for?
Absolutely. And thank you for giving me the opportunity. So our underwater search and recovery, and not to be confused with a rescue, this is what we call our dive team. This is after it's post-incident when something has happened on a body of water. This group is called in to not to rescue, but they're there for search and recovery of evidence or other things. Our dive team is there's some disagreement, but ours is one of the oldest and longest operating in the state of Kansas. It's comprised of Douglas County Sheriff's Office employees, Lawrence Police Department employees, as well as Lawrence Douglas County Fire Medical firefighters and paramedic employees. It is run and taken care of by the Sheriff's Office. It has its own facility over on the north side of town, and we have had just an increase over the years of the amount of work that we do, but also the groups with whom we work with. When it comes to the state of Kansas, there are only 7 underwater search and recovery units, of which 2 are less than a year old. And in the greatest scheme of things, there's only 2, and us being one of them, that actually have the technology to get on the bigger bodies of water. So therefore, we've been called to all of our surrounding counties except Johnson County because Olathe has their own, and so they work up there. But Shawnee County and Topeka Police, Jefferson, Atchison, Franklin County have all utilized our services as well as other areas in the state. And we do everything from looking for obviously recovering the bodies of drowning victims or homicide victims, down to looking for evidence. Specific cases that I've been involved in, I've had to have our team come to Topeka, to Lake Shawnee, to look for a gun that was thrown after a homicide. But also we've, there's a very high profile case in our next door neighbor, Leavenworth County, where a young man's been missing since the late 80s. And I personally have assisted along with our dive team in searching bodies of water for that young man and his vehicle. So our list is extensive of what we do and how we do it. One last thing I do want to say though is we had a drowning at the Douglas County State Fishing Lake here 2-3 years ago, and we had to call the Missouri Highway Patrol in because they're kind of actually the national experts when it comes to this. And they had a piece of equipment that we didn't have. And within minutes, they were able to do what we've been taking 2 days to get done. We now own that exact same piece of equipment. We've had it for several years, and it's the only one in the state of Kansas. It is ours, and it requires a certain type of boat. Now, when we talk about the boat specifically, we have a 27-foot or whatever, a 24-foot pontoon. It's the same thing that people take out on the lake every weekend, but we've outfitted it for our needs, but it's not built for our purpose. It is getting a little older. It still has some value as far as resale, but the need for our technology upgrades as well as our usage requires that we just need to get something that is dedicated specifically for this purpose. So the cost of this boat is high. One thing I need to point out is that Obviously, it is budgeted money. It already has been approved, but we're here to talk about it. But the sheriff's office actually only requested 48 of this 92,000 to be budgeted to us for the boat itself. The sheriff's office will use its own personal, let's say personal funds, our own funds, to purchase the rest of the equipment up to that $92,000 threshold. So $48,000 is really what the county chipped in, and then we covered the rest. So, but we couldn't split it up as far as trying to go that route, and you all know that. So, but the other thing on the boat itself is this is a very, very specific. It's a custom built boat by a company that only does these types of boats. And there was no bid process for this because it is a one-off. It is a custom boat. It is built for us. I believe that in our item agenda report, we failed to mention that we would like to waive the policy for the purchase policy on that, because there was no way to have a bid or a competitive process simply because we're buying a unicorn simply for ourselves. So if I need to amend the agenda item report, we can certainly do that, but I'm making that request as well.
Thank you for that.
Any other additional questions, Commissioner Willie? Sheriff, this is Commissioner Kelly. I appreciate you going over the forfeiture part of that budget, and making sure that the public understands that this is only a percentage of it. So thank you for that. Commissioner Willie, we've already taken public comment, maybe sort of unique. We don't usually have public comment on every item on the consent agenda. So, I think what we'll do is, would you like to make a motion on this item?
I can make a motion on this item specifically, and then would you like
Yeah.
separate motions for the other? consent
Yeah,
agenda
let's go
items?
ahead and work with this item first. Yeah.
I move to approve item 2.2 on the consent agenda for the Douglas County Sheriff's Office underwater search and recovery boat.
Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we've taken public comment on all items. Maybe we, I don't think that we, yeah, I'm comfortable with that. Commissioner Willie, how comfortable are you with the rest of this? I mean, we've heard public comment. Is there anyone else who has public comment maybe who hasn't provided public comment already on items 1, 3, 4? Oh, we did 4. 1, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And for this, I'll only take public comment on those who haven't provided it already on all other items.
Is there
Commissioner
any public comment on the remainder of those items? Yes, commissioners, we have which item would you like to comment on? Well, we took public comment on the rest, so this would be on anything other than 2.4. Do you want that specific one? Yeah, commissioners, I thought we had closed public comment on it, on this item, so I don't know if you want.
Oh, do we have somebody for item 2.4?
Yes, do you want to talk on 2.4, Michael? We have the ability to open up public comment if.
I'm good, I'm just enjoying watching.
Okay. Do you want to talk on 2.4? That was 2.4, do you want to talk on the boat? You want to talk about, which one do you want to talk about?
Kind of 2, but 3 and.
Well, if we want us to take them one at a time, you can have 3 minutes on each one, or,
Just go during public
okay, then you can wait and do that. Yep, that's totally fine. Last call for public comment on consent. I don't think I have anyone else here for public comment on consent.
Okay,
Commissioner Kelly,
yes.
since we have the sheriff here, can we, there's a grant that was awarded to the sheriff's department. Could we ask for any just celebrating those accomplishments? I think is worthwhile. Can we ask for any comments from Sheriff Armbruster?
Sure.
I wasn't planning on that, but thank you. We have in the last, since in the last year and a half, we've had somebody that's working very specifically on grants. This is one of two very large ones that we've received. This one is for equipment. The other one is for ballistic vests. I mean, I don't want to call him out by name, but we have one employee who has done a magical job of getting us some grant money, and we're super appreciative of it. And it's going to be put to good use.
Thank you, and sorry I put you on the spot.
Okay. I'm going to make a motion to approve items, consent agenda items 1, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9.
Let's second that.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. We will now move on to general public comment. You have general public comment?
Yes.
The courthouse first.
Yeah, Commissioner, could you reread that statement again, just so, because we've got some folks that haven't been here for public comment before, so they can hear what we do for public comment.
All right. So for public comment, we call on folks who are first here in person, and then we turn to any online commenters who are here tonight. If you're on Zoom, please plan to use the raise your hand function when the time comes and listen to staff to call your name. All comments will be limited to 3 minutes, and we ask everyone to give their full name, Douglas County residents, for our meeting minutes. All public comments should be directed at the County Commission. We also reserve the right to mute or remove any speaker who is vulgar, rude, or inappropriate. The public should know that comments received by the Commission during our meetings do not represent the views of Douglas County government. These items should be relevant public comments on a topic that is not on our agenda. All right, we do not have any regular agenda items. Appointments, I don't believe I have any appointments. Commissioner Willie, do you? No.
I don't think I have any today, commissioners. I'll verify where we are for next week.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. And we'll move on to miscellaneous. Typically, we begin our miscellaneous with Sarah's comments and her administrator memo.
Thank you, commissioners. My memo is included in the packet. I want to just call your attention. I know there've been a lot of conversations about homelessness and our cooperation with the city of Lawrence on homelessness issues. Jill Joliker has been spearheading our efforts on that, and she put an updated memo in the commission packet outlining kind of some of the current work we're doing related to homelessness. And Jill is available if the commissioners have questions related to her memo, or just where we just some of the current information that we've received on that. So I wanted to provide her with that opportunity, and then I may have a few other things to wrap up with.
Jill, I think it would be totally appropriate if you're prepared to give us just a little bit of an overview of where we are on homelessness, and since that's been a big topic lately.
Sure. Well, the cover memo, or the memo that I provided gave a, kind of reminded the commission and also probably just like of introduction perhaps to Commissioner Willie, although I think she had awareness of it, that the city and the county entered into a joint resolution last year outlining formal commitments to work collaboratively to address issues of homelessness. And that relates to how we engage with our community partners, how we engage between the city and the county on efforts that were mutually and at times exclusively responsible for, but it makes sense as a system to be in coordinated efforts around. And since that time, and honestly leading up to that time, the city and the county have really had, I think, a really strong track record of collaboration together. And I'm really pleased with the relationship that we have with city staff in the homelessness services division, the homelessness initiatives division, which is a part of city planning and zoning, but also the city manager's office. Sarah and I and the city manager and Danny Walters have some routine check-ins where we're making sure that both organizations are on the same page. But then staff are in routine communication with one another, and we have a lot of coordination of the system as it relates to our regional coordinator position that's filled by David Tucker, who works to support all the entities and make sure that we have robust communication and planning and coordination for folks that are in need of care and housing. So there's a lot of things happening most days of the week. And I feel very, very good about that. So, you know, as part of those communications and collaborations that we have together, there's a lot of awareness on county staff part of the work that the City of Lawrence is doing to spearhead the development of the operations of a winter shelter, as they did last year, but also to stand up what is an unsanctioned but supported campsite. It's unsanctioned because of it doesn't have a formal permit to be operating. It's operating within the guise of the city ordinance. So that's takes a little, the city staff explains a lot better, but they've set up a campsite with support from the City of Lawrence staff in North Lawrence. And I think a lot of folks have awareness of that, but there's a lot of coordination around making sure that we're, to the best extent possible, monitoring the folks that are staying there. And when I say monitoring, it's monitoring folks. So we have, the list of those folks is maintained to keep track of folks, to connect them to care. When there's the weekly planning meetings like coordinated entry, case conferencing, we now have this robust list of folks that are camping at that site that case managers can find out if they're there, and they can make sure that they can connect with them to get them to court appointments. I think that came up 2 times yesterday in a case coordination planning meeting, that knowing that a client was staying at the campsite, case managers knew that they could go over, connect with them, and make sure that they got to their court appointments, got to their Bert Nash appointment, things like that. So that coordination continues, and we provide that support. Some of the other concerns that were shared that I tried to just brush over briefly in the memo are, I acknowledge that the county staff has been a part of conversations to find a more permanent site for a sanctioned campsite. But to my knowledge, no site has been identified that we have awareness of, or any proposals been prepared or submitted or developed for how that site would be operated and supported on an ongoing basis. And any site that is considered that is on county property or adjacent to county property would be entered into in terms of a conversation that involves the adjacent property owners and would have a strong understanding of what the operating plan is and the supportive services and the exit ramp, if you will, to permanent housing. And then the other concerns that have been addressed in that memo relate to the concerns that have been shared from community members relate to Lawrence Community Shelter. The city and the county, once again, are in really routine communication in lockstep with one another around our expectations for the Lawrence Community Shelter as it relates to the city and the county funding. We're really working hard on the 2023 agreement. We're going to be moving the Lawrence Community Shelter over to a services agreement, which is very similar to the services agreement that Bert Nash, DECA, Artists Helping the Homeless, Kansas Suicide Prevention, a lot of other, we've shifted a lot of our supports, our programming partnerships over to the service agreement rather than the community partner agreement, which provides 2 lump sum amounts with not a lot of definition around the scope of services and expectations. So we are outlining a scope of services and expectations that are shared between the city and the county. And we're having a lot of exchanges and dialogues with the administration and the board of directors at the Lawrence Community Shelter to try to get that agreement into a final form that could then come back to the commission. There have been some exchanges around the question of capacity. When that agreement was, when that amount, the current amount of funding was determined in 2019, that amount being $296,000. The expectation was that the average capacity on a nightly basis would be 65 individuals. At that time, that did include families. Lawrence Community Shelter is no longer serving families, focusing on single individuals and trying to be more trauma informed in their approach. But the number of folks that they're indicating that they can house on a nightly basis with the county and city funding and other sources of funding that they have is 50. I think conversations between city and county staff were hopeful that that number could be closer to the 65, and we're not getting an indication that that's possible at this point. I think that the city and the county, you know, we want to make sure that we're communicating with our elected officials and our managers to make sure you're aware of these conversations. And as I mentioned in my memo, that service agreement ultimately will come back to the commission, the city commission and the county commission to approve for 2023. And the funding to support that agreement, once it's approved, will only be made on a reimbursement basis, receiving the outcomes reporting that accompanies the invoices for requests for reimbursement, again, similar to our agreements with Burt Nash and DECA and Heartland Rate Act. And then just pivoting to what we try to focus on here at Douglas County, and our lane in this work is the focus on supportive housing and permanent housing for our community members. And so I provided a copy of the July 11th memo that was provided for the city county meeting that outlines pretty extensive list of all the initiatives that the county is engaged in. One thing I'll mention that's not on there that's happened since I crafted that memo is the Housing and Homelessness Stakeholders Group is really working intently to develop a strategic plan that's reflective of the two needs assessments that were done for Douglas County. We hope to have a draft strategic plan for the city and the county commissions to review early next year, but we have some work groups that are convening and trying to craft short and long-term plans. And that's all I have.
Thanks, Jill. Commissioner Willie, any questions?
I do have a follow-up question, Jill, and you did cover this. I just want to kind of come back to it for clarification, because I know I've specifically been asked by members of the public, like, is it a matter of funding for Lawrence Community Shelter for capacity, or is it, I mean, it sounds like the conversation with Lawrence Community Shelter, which is its own nonprofit, but that it is, there's no interest in changing that capacity at any price. Is that a fair statement?
I'm not certain on that. I think that the city and county staff have questions regarding the operational structure that supports the capacity. So I think additional money could lead to additional capacity, but it's hard to understand how that capacity is related to the staffing plan and the operational structure. We have a lot of questions that relate to that. And
I guess I'd also like to add here too, Commissioner Willie, it's important that we've had a lot of conversations about understanding what some of the factors are with homelessness in our community. The answer to solving homelessness is not a bigger shelter. The answer is, how do we move people out of emergency shelter and into more supportive and transitional and permanent housing? Simply warehousing people is not an answer to homelessness. So the best practice is that emergency shelters are probably smaller than people think. Because the answer is to move people through an emergency shelter environment and into different and better options. So while I do think there are possibilities to increase the size of the capacity, it's important to note that emergency shelter will not solve our homelessness problem here in Douglas County.
I also think it's reflective of the trajectory that HUD is on, and that they are no longer interested in funding congregate sheltering. HUD is encouraging communities to look at non-congregate sheltering. And I think a lot about the responses that City of Lawrence, and I hope Douglas County, when the time is right, to respond to the home art funding solicitation that's going to be available through the state, will be reflective of some opportunities that we can apply here locally for some non-congregate emergency sheltering options. And again, those, we know we need to have some of those some more resources available while we build out the permanent supportive housing and transitional housing that we envision in our plan, in our strategic plan, and as that was identified in the needs assessments. We need to have some interim strategies, but what, as Sarah said, those congregate settings for large numbers of folks are not ideal, and they're not considered a best practice anymore, even by HUD and other potential funders that we would like to have a part of this funding scenario in the future.
Sheila, thank you for flagging that July 11th meeting. That was the meeting that was between both City Commission and County Commission to discuss exactly this. And I did watch that at the time. I think it's worth watching again, and I'm glad you flagged it for the public. I know one of the questions that has been asked by people, and especially by the downtown businesses group that sent the letter, is how do the city and county work together, or suggesting that the city and county are not working together. And I think that's one of the take-home messages, is that this is one area where we're really strong in working with our city as a partner, and each group having their own avenue that we're working towards, but in together, working together. So I'm just glad for you to flag that for people.
Yeah, and I just want to highlight for those who, are frustrated, and I know a lot are, by our homelessness situation. I encourage them to look at the best practices that are listed in Built for Zero and what we're working towards. That, as Sarah articulated, that's a bit of a mind shift sometimes for people. And, it's why Douglas County invested so much of our ARPA funds in building supportive housing. It would be nice if we could just say, poof, there's $10 million worth of supportive housing in our community, but it's going to take time to build up that inventory. And then also we have to do everything we can to keep people housed where they are now. And I think, Jill, if you could just talk a little bit about what the county is doing now, to keep people housed.
Sure. We're coming close to the first full year of the county's human services program. And part of that, one of the core programs within the program is the Housing Stabilization Collaborative, which Douglas County assumed the administrative responsibility over through the leadership of our human services program manager, Gabby Sprague. And that program has awarded, I had it in a memo last week or the week before, provided an indication of how much funding had been administered through that program. And I don't have that right in front of me, but millions of dollars have been distributed. We have created through the annual budget ongoing funding for rent and utility assistance that is triple the amount that was available on an ongoing basis prior to the pandemic. We are using a considerable amount of one-time pandemic dollars that the commission awarded for the Housing Stabilization Collaborative, but there's also ongoing funding that's available through the county's budget to prevent homelessness. And when there are individuals individuals that are experiencing homelessness can apply for HSC funds. I will just share, for the good of this conversation, to eliminate some of the challenges. it is difficult to find landlords that are willing to work with those individuals and to support folks that are transitioning out of homelessness. Invariably, a lot of the agencies are indicating that we have money, we just cannot find landlords that are willing to work with a lot of these folks. And so in a lot of ways, you know, our approach, as you mentioned, Commissioner Kelly, to build our way out of a lot of these challenges, we can do some of that with the ARPA projects that we have slated and some of the other projects that I know our friends at Bert Nash and DECA have on their on the horizon. But at the end of the day, we need to have our community collaborating, and we need to have more landlords invested in this work along with us. We do have funding available for the rent utility assistance. We do have funding available for damage deposits and mitigation strategies. And we know that our landlords, it's not an easy relationship for landlords to get into with serving this population. But the county at least wants to have a chance at trying to play our part in supporting landlords if there are ways that we can do that in a meaningful way through those damage deposits and risk mitigation funds.
Thank you, Jill. I appreciate that. The only, I said there were 3 documents. One would be, you know, doing some research on the Built for Zero that county has agreed that that's part of our strategy. Also, I'd encourage the public to take a look at both of the assessments that were done by Douglas County for supportive housing and homelessness. And I think it really gives you a picture of, you know, all the solutions that we are trying to work on to solve this problem, and that it will take time. And that's frustrating. But I appreciate people working together and the collaboration that's happening with the city. The work that you're doing, Jill, the work that our partners at the city are doing, and all those human service providers that are working together to try to find the many solutions to this. Because for one person, it may be utility assistance, and the next person, it may be mental health services. And, you know, there's just a wide variety of challenges that face us. And I really appreciate the work you're doing, and so many are doing, to try to weave that net together to address this really serious problem. Commissioner Willie, anything else on this?
I wanted to see, Jill, could you flag for the public where to find the memo from tonight and also the other documents that Patrick Kelly, Commissioner Kelly is talking about?
Sorry. Yes, we will get them added to the packet if they're not already there.
Yeah, the memo from July should be included in the packet. The other assessments, we'll need to go back and look and see when those were submitted to the county commission, and we can make sure that reference, commissioners have that information as to what meetings those were on.
Yeah, additionally, people can just Google Douglas County Supportive Housing Needs Assessment or Douglas County Homelessness Needs Assessment, and they'll find those.
And I'm happy to engage with any folks that that would like to receive those those needs assessments, or have a better sense of the work of the groups. But I feel really good about the collaborative spirit right now and the efforts to date. And I think that everybody's doing the best they can right now from my vantage point.
Commissioners, if there are no other discussion of that, I do want to just mention that I'm going to make a commitment to make sure that we are talking about the status of the Treatment and Recovery Center as often as possible at county commission meetings, so that the public can stay aware of where we're at and what discussion is happening, and so that we're fully transparent in that. This last week, I've had a number of conversations with Dr. George Thompson, the executive director of the Behavioral Health Partners. And he and I have met frequently. We're working on identifying what steps need to be taken to proceed to opening. And we're having a number of conversations with with staff. And in terms of that, I don't have anything really to report in terms of action steps in a week. But we are working on that. And then I will look to work with Dr. Thompson's schedule to have more regular status updates with the county commission as to where we're at. You've got some meetings canceled coming up here in November, and I'm out for a meeting. So I will try to identify a date and let the commissioners know as soon as possible. And then we can let the public know as well. I would also just add that next week we do have a 4 o'clock work session with the early childhood care. Help me, Jill. There's 3 C's, ECCCC.
Early Childhood Community Center.
Great. So they will be here for an update at our 4 o'clock meeting. And just while I have folks paying attention to this, I do anticipate, so the damage in the courthouse, while I do believe we will be able to open the treasurer's office tomorrow, most of the damage was sustained in the county commission hearing room, most significantly to our audio visual equipment. Our audio visual equipment is key to being able to offer this meeting via Zoom. Without that equipment, we are sort of, if we want to have a Zoom meeting, we're sort of forced into this situation where commissioners are not in the same space. So I'm just going to ask folks to stay tuned as we determine where we will be next week. I think it's a high likelihood that we may not be able to have the equipment available in the county commission chambers next week, and that we may need to meet off-site for that and to have the full commission together. But we're still in the process of really assessing that damage and what additional equipment we would need to have the commission meet off-site to offer a meeting with Zoom for that. So I just ask folks to stay in touch with us. And when we publish the agenda for next week on Friday, we'll hopefully I'll have some answers by then, but I'm not even sure I'm going to know by Friday. So I just appreciate the community's patience with us as we try to work through this. And that's all I have, commissioners.
Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate that. Commissioner Willie, any other miscellaneous items?
I do actually. If you'll allow me, I'd like to give a great shout out to Deputy Mike Steele, who has been part of Douglas County Court Security and also has had the questionable privilege of providing security for our meetings for countless numbers of hours of county commission meetings. So he's been there and faithful and looking out for us. And today is his last meeting, and it's a little anticlimactic then to be on Zoom, but he is retiring. He's been with Douglas County Sheriff's Office since 2014 and had a long career in law enforcement prior to that with the Topeka Police and also as a Douglas County probation officer. So we just thank him for his service and wish that we were saying that to him in person. So I wanted to give that a shout out. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Willie. I'd like to just sort of update the community a little bit on Sarah and I were able to meet with Rob Richardson today, who is working on behalf of the Economic Development Corporation of Lawrence and Douglas County to sort of head up our approach to the Panasonic plant, I guess is the best way to put it. I've heard from lots of members of the community who are interested in how the county especially is preparing for Panasonic to open their plant. I think just any time now we should hear whether the Panasonic board has finally approved that. But we expect that will have between some impact and a whole lot of impact in Douglas County. So we'll see what happens there. But I really appreciate all of those who stepped up to help fund Rob's position and the EDC for really working through what the work that he'll be doing. I appreciate Bonnie Lowe's leadership in that space as well at our chamber, because I do think we need to have a collective approach that involves all of our municipalities, all of our school districts, and the county as well, because all of this will impact our infrastructure systems. It will impact our school district. It will impact our housing. To what degree, we don't know yet, but I think we need to be prepared and have a thoughtful approach to it. And having Rob as that point person, I think it is really exciting. So he comes with a lot of skills, a lot of background. He comes from working on large projects in the Metro Kansas City area. And I think he'll be a great addition to the many people who are working hard to be prepared as Panasonic comes to this area. Anything else?
You have one more quick thing, just to note that the discussion about the potential wind energy project in Southwest Douglas County is still making the rounds and in the public mind quite a bit. There was a meeting last night. There have been several community type meetings, not yet called by the county. We don't have any information to share. This is all within a private company, and they're approaching neighbors for potential leases, but that is starting to get some attention. And I did go to the meeting last night to be present for the community, and really just a chance to give to suggest that there's public comment options coming to the Planning Commission very soon. It was pulled from this month's agenda. I've been trying to watch for that so that I can get that pushed out to the public. Should be possibly next month's agenda for November. Sometimes November is a short meeting for the Planning Commission. So just keeping an eye out and knowing that people are interested and people want to be heard, and make sure that we can give them the opportunity to be heard. First at the Planning Commission and on the wind regulations. I should have said that. We do not have a project application of any sort at the county, so we have no knowledge beyond what the neighbors know. But the wind regulations should be coming back to the Planning Commission very shortly.
Thank you. Okay, there's nothing else. Sarah, we'll stay tuned to see where we'll be meeting or how we'll be meeting next week. We appreciate the community's patience on this. We know this isn't the best perfect way to do a meeting, but luckily we experienced this during COVID, and we appreciate all those who joined us online or they're in, now we can say, the rotunda of the county courthouse. So with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you to Sarah for sharing her office for this also.